Behind the glittering lights of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair stood a hotel like no other. Guests checked in, but many never checked out. This is the story of H. Holmes, America's first serial killer, and his murder castle of horrors. Chicago, 1893. The city was alive with wonder. The world's Columbian Exposition, the grandest fair America had ever seen, had transformed the city into a glowing beacon of invention, progress, and spectacle. Millions of visitors poured into Chicago, eager to marvel at dazzling exhibits, new technology, and the dream of a modern future. But only a few blocks away from the fairgrounds, another building stood. Plain and unassuming from the outside, it looked like nothing more than a modest three-story hotel. Guests came and went, lured by cheap rooms and its convenient location. Yet inside, behind the walls and locked doors, this hotel concealed something far more sinister. It would come to be known as the Murder Castle. And its owner, a man named Herman Webster Mudgett, better remembered by his alias H. Holmes, would go down in history as one of America's first and most infamous serial killers. To step inside Holmes's castle was to step into a carefully designed trap. Hidden staircases that led nowhere. Dead-end hallways. Rooms without windows. Soundproof chambers where screams went unheard. Chutes that dropped directly to the basement. And, in that basement, a roaring furnace, the final destination for many who entered but never came out. This is the chilling story of H. Holmes, conman, fraudster, and killer, a man who embodied the dark side of the American dream. Herman Webster Mudgett was born in 1861 in Gilmanton, New Hampshire. Outwardly, he seemed like any other bright child in a small town. But even from an early age, there were signs of something unsettling. Tales later surfaced that he had a fascination with anatomy, that he dissected animals, and that he was fascinated, even aroused, by death. Some stories may be exaggerated, but what is clear is that Holmes grew into a man who combined charm with cruelty. By his teenage years, he had already developed a taste for deception. He lied easily, manipulated others, and showed little remorse for wrongdoing. After finishing school, he pursued medicine, not out of compassion, but for opportunity. He attended the University of Michigan's medical school, where he learned anatomy, dissection, and chemistry. These skills, instead of leading him to a respectable career as a doctor, became tools for something darker. While still a student, Holmes discovered he had a talent for fraud. He stole cadavers from the university, mutilated them to look like accident victims, and then took out insurance policies in their names. When the bodies were discovered, he would collect the payout. It was an early sign of the blend of intelligence, charm, and ruthlessness that would later define his career as a killer. By the time he graduated, he was already a seasoned conman, and he was just getting started. After medical school, Mudgett moved frequently, leaving behind debts and suspicions wherever he went. But he also reinvented himself, adopting the new name Dr. Henry Howard Holmes. With his tall frame, piercing eyes, and smooth manners, Holmes exuded the confidence of a successful doctor. Women found him attractive, men found him trustworthy, and almost everyone who met him underestimated the danger that lurked beneath the surface. By the mid-1880s, Holmes had arrived in Chicago, a city booming with opportunity. The skyline was dotted with construction cranes, railroads brought in new residents daily, and fortunes were being made overnight. For a man like Holmes, who thrived on lies and schemes, it was the perfect hunting ground. He found work in a pharmacy owned by an elderly widow. When her husband mysteriously vanished, Holmes smoothly offered to buy the business from her. Soon after, the widow herself disappeared. Neighbors asked questions, but Holmes had a gift for deflection. He claimed she had moved away to California. No one ever saw her again. Now the owner of a thriving drugstore on the corner of South Wallace Avenue, Holmes began planning something larger. Across the street, he purchased an empty lot. On it, he would construct a building that would cement his place in history. From the outside, Holmes's building looked ordinary, even dull. A three-story brick structure that blended into the neighborhood. The ground floor contained shops and Holmes's pharmacy. The upper floors were advertised as hotel rooms for visitors. But the real horror lay inside, hidden from the public eye. Holmes acted as his own architect, designing every detail. But he cleverly hired and fired dozens of construction crews, ensuring that no one person knew the full layout of the building. Workers thought the design was eccentric, but they didn't ask questions. Holmes was charming, persuasive, and always one step ahead. What they built was not a normal hotel. It was a labyrinth of death. Hallways twisted into dead ends. Trapdoors and false walls concealed hidden rooms. Windowless chambers were fitted with gas pipes, controlled from Holmes's office. Soundproof rooms ensured that no one outside could hear the screams. Secret chutes ran from upstairs rooms directly to the basement. And in that basement, Holmes's true playground. He installed an industrial furnace, acid vats, quicklime pits, and a dissection table. Here, the bodies of his victims could be burned, dissolved, or stripped of flesh. Sometimes, Holmes allegedly sold the skeletons to medical schools, profiting from death just as he had in his student days. Holmes called his creation a hotel. Later, it would be remembered as the Murder Castle. Who were the victims of H. Holmes? Historians debate the exact number. Holmes himself would later claim to have killed more than 200 people, though most believe this was an exaggeration. The truth is murkier, perhaps 20, perhaps more. But what is certain is that dozens of people entered Holmes's castle and were never seen again. Many of his victims were young women. Holmes had an easy charm, and he often offered women jobs in his hotel or pharmacy. He promised independence, good pay, and security, a tempting offer in an era when opportunities for women were limited. Some were lovers he seduced. Others were employees he lured into contracts that made him their beneficiary. For Holmes, murder was often about convenience as much as cruelty. He killed when someone became an obstacle, when an employee grew suspicious, or when a lover's presence threatened his other schemes. Each death was carefully planned, executed in the secret chambers of his castle, and erased in the furnace below. The pattern was chilling. Holmes would hire or seduce a woman, lure her into a contract, then kill her once she had outlived her usefulness. Her body would disappear into the basement. Neighbors sometimes noticed that women who worked for Holmes vanished abruptly, but Holmes always had an explanation. They had moved away, married, or found work elsewhere. His lies were smooth, his confidence unshakable. In 1893, Chicago hosted the World's Columbian Exposition, celebrating the 400th anniversary of Columbus's arrival in the New World. It was an event of staggering scale, attracting more than 27 million visitors from across the globe. The fair was a dazzling spectacle of architecture, electricity, and invention. The birthplace of the Ferris wheel, the introduction of Cracker Jack, and the showcase of America's industrial might. But for Holmes, the fair was something else entirely, an endless supply of victims. Tourists and young women flooded into Chicago, many in search of adventure, jobs, or cheap lodging. Holmes's hotel, located near the fairgrounds, was perfectly positioned. To visitors, it was simply a convenient and affordable place to stay. To Holmes, it was a spider's web. Some guests checked in and were never seen again. Rumors spread of young women who disappeared after visiting the fair, but in a city overwhelmed with newcomers and transients, vanishings were not uncommon. Few connected the dots back to Holmes. Holmes was not only a murderer, he was also a relentless swindler. His scams were as elaborate as his castle. He defrauded suppliers by ordering goods on credit and never paying. He conned investors into backing fake inventions. He forged signatures, manipulated legal documents, and lied to creditors. One of his most infamous scams involved insurance fraud. Holmes would persuade associates to take out life insurance policies, naming him as the beneficiary. Then they would conveniently disappear. Sometimes Holmes staged their deaths using corpses. Other times, he simply killed them outright. His ability to juggle lies, charm his way out of suspicion, and exploit every opportunity was extraordinary. But eventually, his web of deception began to unravel. Holmes's downfall began with a man named Benjamin Pitzel. Pitzel was a carpenter, handyman, and occasional criminal who became Holmes's right-hand man. The two worked together on various scams, and Holmes used Pitzel to do much of his dirty work. In 1894, Holmes devised a scheme to swindle an insurance company. The plan was simple. Pitzel would fake his own death in a laboratory explosion, using a corpse supplied by Holmes. Holmes would then collect the $10,000 insurance payout, sharing it with Pitzel's wife and family. But Holmes had no intention of sharing. Instead of faking Pitzel's death, Holmes killed him for real, knocking him unconscious with chloroform and setting his body on fire. He then convinced Pittizal's widow that the plan had gone as expected. Holmes promised to care for her and her 5 children while handling the money. In reality, Holmes was manipulating her into handing over custody of 3 of her children, Alice, Nellie, and Howard. He traveled across the country with them, spinning elaborate lies, all while plotting their deaths. The children vanished one by one. In Toronto, the bodies of Alice and Nellie were later discovered, their remains hidden in a cellar. Howard was never seen again, though evidence suggested he too had been killed. The murder of the Pittizal children shocked the nation and sealed Holmes's reputation as a monster. By this time, authorities were closing in. Holmes had left a trail of unpaid debts, suspicious deaths, and missing people across multiple states. In 1894, he was finally arrested in Boston, not for murder, but for horse theft, one of his many petty frauds. But as investigators dug deeper, they uncovered the insurance scam, the disappearance of the Pittizal children, and the sinister rumors surrounding his Chicago hotel. Newspapers went wild. Holmes was portrayed as a devil incarnate, a man with a castle of horrors who had slaughtered hundreds. Sensational headlines claimed he had built a death factory with torture devices, acid pits, and stretching racks. While some of these claims were exaggerated, the truth was terrifying enough. Holmes was tried and convicted for the murder of Benjamin Pittizal. The evidence was overwhelming, and Holmes himself confessed. Though in true fashion, he also boasted of killing more than 200 people, a claim most historians dismiss as fantasy. On May 7, 1896, H. Holmes was hanged at Moyamensing Prison in Philadelphia. Witnesses reported that even in death, he remained calm, almost smug. It took him nearly 20 minutes to die, his body jerking as the rope failed to snap his neck cleanly. For many, it was a fittingly grim end. After Holmes's execution, his Chicago castle stood as a grim reminder of his crimes. Locals whispered of strange noises and ghostly apparitions. Eventually, in 1895, the building was gutted by fire under mysterious circumstances. Some said it was arson, perhaps to destroy the evidence of Holmes's atrocities. Later, the site was rebuilt, and today, nothing of the original murder castle remains. Holmes's true body count may never be known. Some historians argue he killed fewer than a dozen. Others suggest several dozen. What is beyond doubt is that his combination of charm, intelligence, and ruthlessness made him one of the most chilling figures in American history. His story has since become legend, a dark counterpoint to the shining optimism of the World's Fair. Where the fair celebrated progress, Holmes's castle represented the shadows lurking beneath America's rapid rise. The tale of H. Holmes is more than just the story of a murderer. It is the story of a man who embodied the extremes of ambition and evil, who used intelligence not to heal but to destroy, and who turned the tools of modern progress into instruments of death. Chicago's World's Fair dazzled the world with visions of a bright future, but just down the street, Holmes built a fortress of nightmares. Guests walked through its doors and vanished without a trace. Behind polished charm and smooth lies, Holmes orchestrated a reign of terror, his furnace erasing the evidence of his crimes. Today, H. Holmes remains etched in history as America's first serial killer. Whether his victims numbered in the dozens or the hundreds, his legacy endures, a chilling reminder that even in times of progress and hope, evil can lurk in the shadows, wearing the face of a gentleman. That was the story of H. Holmes, the man behind Chicago's murder castle, often remembered as America's first serial killer. If you found this chilling tale intriguing, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more dark histories and true crime stories. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.